Have you ever asked yourself, do I belong here? Or should I stay or should I go? Or how can I find the best fit when I'm looking for a new role? In this session about finding fit, we're going to address these questions and many more to provide some empowering tips. Hi, I'm Kelly Mooney, founder and CEO of Equipped Women, and I'm here with Jeff Tritt, my friend, former colleague, and amazing human. Let me tell you a little bit about Jeff because he's been involved with Equipped Women from the beginning. He has a super unique background. He spent half of his career on the client and the agency side of marketing, working with big brands like Miller Brewing and Wendy's and Sherwin-Williams. And then the other half of his career was focused on leading the talent and leadership, organizational design, and what we call cultural progression of global players like Leo Burnett and IBM iX. And so now Jeff spends his time coaching CEOs and leadership teams, and he helps them thrive by building workplaces that focus on the employee experience as the cornerstone to driving real sustainable business results. I'm really excited to have Jeff here. So welcome, Jeff Tritt.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you, Kelly.
I love this topic that really you helped me create for Equipped Women because we found it to be such a common topic that people struggled with. So first of all, thank you for helping us sort of explore these ideas. And I'm really excited to just jump into this with you today. So let's just get to it.
All right. Sounds good.
So I think you know that one of the reasons I chose this topic is because after coaching over 100 women in the past year, nearly every one of them wanted to improve fit with their employer and were struggling with that. So I wanted to just ask you to kind of frame this for people, explain the key dimensions of fit and what's in our control as individual employees.
Yeah, thank you. Well, yeah, it's such an important topic when you think about the amount of times of our life that we spend in work, and being intentional about it is just so important. And I think when you're thinking about this topic of fit, it's really one of the things I found most helpful is when you broaden your own perspective about, well, what does fit actually mean? And I think there might be more than four, but there's at least four that are worthy of everyone's attention when you start to address this issue. And I think the first one, and I think this is true in most parts of our lives, is to first take a look at ourselves. Like, what's going on with me in this situation? How am I showing up? And I think taking inventory and being really honest with yourself about that is really important. And some things you might ask yourself is, hey, how am I performing? Am I adding value? Are some of those things? Am I displaying a growth mindset? Or are some things? Are you looking to get feedback? Is another example. There's so many different ways to really take a look at yourself and just understand how you're showing up. Because if you're not showing up and taking care of yourself, and you're trying to fix yourself by changing things versus just working on yourself, you're going to be on a long slog because you're never really going to get to the core of it. So just first really paying attention. How are you showing up at the game? Are you being your authentic self? And is your best version going forward? So I think that's one of the most important things to start there. Because if you're not happy internally with how you're showing up, there's going
Totally.
to be some challenges. I think another area that you can look at, I think it's really important, is to look at, hey, is the company that I'm at, is it a good fit? Is there a good values, and is the culture, is the trajectory of the company? Or if you happen to be in a large company, the department that you're in, how is that culture? How are those values playing out for you? I do think it's important that you feel that your own personal values can overlap with the overall company, or again, the department, if you're in a massively big company, that you're aligned with those things, that your contributions, that you feel overall that they're valued and appreciated. And just the overall health of the company, that's really important. You want to know that the company is growing, and even if it's going through a tough patch at the moment, that there's good progress ahead so that you can continue to grow and have an impact. So looking at that, that's a good area to just pay attention to and take some inventory of. I think another area that's really worth spending some time on is really digging in and really understanding your role. And hey, what's the scope? What are the future options? are you challenged in that role? Are you overwhelmed in that role? Is it too much for you or is it too little? Are you having to sideline more of your strengths than you'd like to actually continue to grow? And so I think that's really important to look at that. And oftentimes the role, separate from the job description, a lot of times it's like, hey, can I learn with this manager that I have or with other managers that might be in my department? It's really important. But I do think the overarching piece on the role piece is, are you growing and are you evolving? Because that's so
And
critical.
sometimes to that point, sometimes you're showing up and you're in the right company, but maybe you're in the wrong function or in a department that isn't the best fit. And so being able to look horizontally across the business to
Yeah.
say, maybe there's another role that's a better fit for me here.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think as you continue to grow in your career, and you take different roles, you're going to refine what feels like the right fit.
Yeah.
It's an evolving thing as you find the areas that really fuel you and give you energy and that really feel like they're in your unique ability. So I think that's really important to pay attention to that. And I think by stepping back and pausing before you think about any kind of switch, it's really important to kind of take inventory of that. I think another area that's worth at least, again, pausing on as you're looking at fit is kind of the environment that you're in. And, I think everybody feels at home, feels comfortable in different types of environments, whether that's the office, it's the configuration, it's the way the team works together. Some people are really great with virtual work. Other people, they really need to be in check. So understanding those things and not discounting them because it just makes you normal to have your own preferences in terms of the environment. And I think, also I think from an environmental standpoint, it's like whatever your role is or whatever your job is do you feel like you can integrate, your life and your work in a way that works for you and fuels you more and more? So I think those are some key dimensions, and there may be others that people can kind of put on their own list, but instead of like, I think when we think about it, I think all too often we just get focused on the role and we don't really look at the broader perspective. And the value of looking at the broader perspective is it just gives you so many more choices. And that's
Yeah,
the advantage of
that's super
stepping back.
helpful. I think that's really great to expand the aperture or the lens like you were talking about. And one of the things in the conversation I notice is that some people just get antsy. And I think this happens a lot with women. Sometimes they keep their heads down, they work, work,
Right.
work, and then they just sort of feel fed up and frustrated. And their first instinct is to just quit and go somewhere else. And
Yeah.
so I know that you caution against that. And again, obviously these four dimensions of fit sort of help,
Yeah.
explain why, but what's your philosophy on this notion of, what my options are?
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm glad that you bring up this point because, yeah, I do think it's like the prison of two ideas when we kind of get to this like space in our careers, and it's like, do I stay or do I go? Like we've already talked about, there's so much that can bring about a better fit. But so I like to shift the question always to like, why am I here and how can I grow? I think what
Love
I
that.
what I would say that it's really important to avoid what I kind of call it the grass is greener trap.
Yeah.
Because the reality of it is in our lives, our work lives, and probably our personal lives too, it's really the challenges and the obstacles that you face at any company or in your life that are often they're really the most fertile ground for growth. So I think it's really important to kind of take inventory of, hey, how can I here grow my knowledge, my skills, my if it's self-management, if it's leadership, if it's influence, and actually committing to trying to wring out every bit of experience, whether it's in that particular role or maybe somewhere else within the company. It's really, I think, from my take, it's the last thing should be the leaving a company, because a lot of people, I think, end up leaving too soon when all the growth was just about to happen for them.
Mhm. Yeah, that's actually a great perspective. I love the shift of the question. It really makes you stop and think. Um,
Mhm.
So you have been at the helm of talent in small, medium, and large companies. So you've seen a lot nationally and globally. You've had a lot of visibility to fit. So what do you think are some of the signs that a job or a company may not be a good fit for someone. You kind of touched on it, but can you
Yeah.
maybe get into a few sort of misfit situations that you've seen over the years and maybe a
Yeah.
remedy?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think because we're all naturally going to grow in our lives. And so we're all going to come up against this a number of times in our lives, and that just makes you normal. So that's great. Uh, but I think the first one is, and I think everybody will be able to relate to this. It's like if you've just been in the same job for too long, things start to get stagnant. There's value to consistency and things that you can count on. And then at a certain point, it just creates stagnancy and you start to kind of get stale.
Mhm.
So that's a real indicator. If things are getting too comfortable and you don't feel like you're on your growth edge at all, beware. I mean, you can ride that train for a little bit, but it's not really going to help you increase your impact in the world. So that would be an indicator that maybe I should start thinking about it. Um, Another one is, sometimes like you might be in a role and you realize, like, let's say you're newer in your career and you got into this one department, you're starting to work it and you're actually maybe doing fairly well in it, but you realize like what you're doing doesn't really align to what your
Mhm.
own pure unique abilities, your own desires. And so that's where a lot of people end up, I think, getting burnt out. It's like they're really good at something, but it's not really what they love. And it's just like you've got to listen to your heart and begin to build a plan for moving on, because you've got a long career ahead, and it's like you deserve to be working in your unique abilities, and you will be so productive and have so many more gifts to give to the world. um,
Yeah.
it's funny, I always tell people we usually don't end up getting burnt out by the things that we hate, because we find a way to avoid those things. But it's those things in the middle that we're pretty good at but we just don't love, is where a lot of people end up. They go to die
Totally.
there. And so
We talk
just being
about that
aware
a
of it.
lot. We talk
Yeah, yeah,
about that a lot in our strength session because a lot of people confuse a strength with a competency. Just because you're good at something, it doesn't mean it's a strength. If it drains you or you don't look
yeah.
forward to it or you're not excited, that it might be a competency, but it's not a strength. And so, how can we spend more time cultivating our strengths and getting work assignments that align with our strengths is a
Yeah.
lot of what we also teach. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and when you do finally step into those areas, what you find is the energy reserves that you didn't even aren't even aware that were in you just like come out, and it feels effortless, and it's just such a joy. And it's great for the company too, because when they can get people in their zones, it's
Yeah.
just it's magical for everybody. I think maybe one more that's worth mentioning, and there's tons that are one could imagine in this category. But I also think sometimes if you can't really imagine a path for expanded growth or opportunity in your role, if there's like a limit, if it's like, let's say there's just no more room in the department or the area that you're working in, it's like you need to like make sure that you're paying attention to that. Like how can you
Mhm.
how can you grow and get on? Because it's just once your growth is capped, it's just you can start to kind of like die a little bit, kind of wilt on the vine a little bit. And
Mhm.
that's not good. That's again, I always think these things are work for the company and for individuals. It's like it's not healthy for the company to have people be stagnating. And it's not good for you. And so I think taking stock of that, if you kind of can't really imagine a trajectory into some growth or some new opportunities, whether it's in that department or elsewhere. Let's say the company might be having challenges or your area is not valuable anymore. It's a good time to take a look and say, where else might I move within a company or to a different company, perhaps,
Mhm.
if it does make
Yeah.
sense. So those are a few. There's obviously more.
Yeah, well, let's go a little deeper on that because I think everyone gets stuck. I mean, it doesn't matter what industry or what level of career you're in. We all get to a place where sometimes we're feeling a little stuck. And so it's hard to get unstuck when we can't sort of see maybe the bigger picture. So
Yeah.
if somebody's feeling stuck in their current role, what would you advise, maybe more specifically, to strengthen the fit? So to take responsibility, like, okay, I want to move forward and figure out how I
Yeah.
can strengthen fit. What would be your guidance on this?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a couple that I think are worth mentioning, and they're all valuable in their own right, and they all can pay really great dividends. So, I think a lot of times, like sometimes we just get antsy a little too quick, and we just have this like want to move to the neighbor and want to move over into that yard or that yard. But I think the first one and the first place to go hunting is, can you grow in place?
Mm.
Um, you know, hey, if you haven't really been showing up with the right mindset, and you're like leaning in and really trying to maximize that opportunity, that's a place where you might want to start first. So growing in place, work on your mindset, identify team members that you can maybe learn some things from. Taking advantage of the company trainings that are available are always great ways that you can grow
Mhm.
right in place. Participating more fully in, it could be employee resource groups, or it could be ad hoc committees on different things. But it's really taking stock about what can I grow right here with this opportunity. Leaving opportunities too soon is not really smart growth. You need to make sure that you've really mastered that role, that you feel good about it, that you're growing professionally and personally, you're learning to balance all those things. Then once you're there, once you've done that really well, there might be some other ways that you
Mhm.
could strengthen fit. But first and foremost, don't be looking over the corner, or around the office, or down the hallway until you've really made the most of what that opportunity you have is. And remember what I said earlier, it's like at the first sign of some challenge or some obstacle, that's not the time to leave. It's the time to like lean in and see what you can gain, either from a tough personal situation, a boss situation, a technical challenge that you have. That's where your new skills are forged.
I think
So
most of us forget that we grow through the hard stuff.
we
That's
grow through
really
the hard
where our
stuff. Yeah.
growth
And
comes from.
yeah, we grow through the hard stuff. And then, and I always tell people, we don't necessarily learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on experience.
Mm.
So it's like, you got to have the hard experience, you got to work through it, and then you got to reflect on it and see what learnings you can gain from it. I think that's really,
Love
really
that.
important. Yeah. But right there within the same organization, there are other ways that you can strengthen fit with a company. One is you could explore an expanded role. Let's say you're in your role and you do like your role, but you want to explore and expand and maybe take on new responsibilities. And I would say that most managers, as long as you're doing your assigned responsibilities well and you're, buttoned up, they're more than eager to accommodate stretch assignments or give you additional or more accountabilities. I always think that most companies, it's kind of like an all you can eat buffet. As long as you're doing your work, you can go back and take on more, and you will find yourself learning, getting new insights, seeing how maybe other departments work and things like that. And you might find your lights just turning on, exploring, contributing in new ways. And I think a lot of times people think it's black or white. Well, I either have to have this role or I have to have a completely different role. And there's ways to be able to begin to bend into those roles that are oftentimes very easy just by talking to your manager or whoever is responsible for those kinds of moves.
I would just add to that asking for those opportunities, because we hear a lot from women who are waiting to be seen or heard or appreciated. And I would just encourage to raise your hand to all the things that you just identified and said, I would like to take this on. I would like this opportunity to declare what you want and not assume that your manager or your colleagues know what that is, because
Yeah,
they often don't. And
yeah, they
so
don't.
really advocating for that, I think, is an important message too.
Absolutely, absolutely. It is so critical that you take ownership for it. And it's empowering, because like once you start to build that habit throughout your career, no matter where you are, different departments, different levels, different companies, when you lean into that, your confidence just grows and you just keep taking on more
Totally.
stuff. And you get to your joy points quicker because you've had more and more experiences. And so it's a great way to kind of test drive some areas that you might not know as much about, and obviously meet new people. And that is, super vital to not only you, but to the companies. They want more connectivity. So it's a really viable option. But another one altogether is, hey, sometimes within a company, particularly mid-size or larger companies, there's so many different roles and responsibilities. Even within departments, sometimes there's completely different roles. Like within marketing, I mean, there's just wildly different roles, and within operations, the same. And the next area is, hey, sometimes even just making a lateral move, like it might be the same like position level on the hierarchy. Maybe the compensation is somewhat similar. Maybe it's a little bit up. It doesn't really matter. But when you make lateral moves in your career that give you the business from a different angle or from a different perspective, it is incredibly valuable to your career. And it can stretch you into new areas. You're collaborating with new teams. I always think that the value of lateral moves is it allows more innovation in your own mind to pop up, because innovation happens at the intersection of different disciplines. And when you kind of have some of those lateral moves, you can see the connectivity points better than people that are maybe just within one sleeve of the organization. I will tell you from a personal standpoint, some of my lateral moves were the best moves I ever made. And and there were some times where I made a lateral move where the money was the same. But then it was the next move where I now had both of
Bigger.
those things where the money came. And so
Yeah.
a lot of times people that they'll like chase the money up one roll sleeve or one kind of dimensional sleeve, and they're not really happy, but they can get that promotion or that extra money, but they're not happy. So particularly early on in your career, broaden. You certainly want to get. I'm always think people should be paid what they're worth and what that role is valued at, but don't chase the money too soon, because you can kind of limit your top end if you approach it just from that angle.
And
So
I think sometimes lateral moves feel like they can be awkward if you're, say, in marketing and you want to be in operations, and it doesn't
yeah,
have to be awkward. I think that, if you find yourself in that situation, you can say to your manager, hey, this is the skill set I'm looking to grow. I am really drawn to operations. I love what I'm doing here, but I want to expand the
yeah,
value that I can bring to the company. And I'd love to explore a move into an opportunity into
yeah,
another functional area.
yeah,
And so I think a lot of people are nervous to have that conversation. And I just want to underscore and let them know, and you can expand on this if you want,
yeah,
that companies really want that. They can't always accommodate it, but
yeah.
they want people who have more cross-functional knowledge because it
Oh,
strengthens the business.
for sure. And it's interesting, like even beyond, I think even what you said, like telling the manager that you want to learn these things, and and they'll obviously see how that will provide value down the road. I would even argue that done the right way and communicate in the right way, it'll provide value immediately in the current situation. Because a lot of times it's when you bring new voices into that let's say you're moving into ops from marketing, you're bringing that wisdom, and your wisdom that you're bringing from there can also make the operations better. And it was funny because one of my biggest career transitions was when I left marketing altogether and I came in and was running talent for Leo Burnett in Chicago. I never took the bait that I was stepping back and they would teach me some of the things I didn't know. I was bringing a vast bit of
Mhm.
knowledge from what it means to be a creative agency, what organizational behavior means. Yes, I was doing it in a different area, but the reality of it was I was bringing a unique perspective to that. And I think
Totally.
we can all find our ways and the reasons why that cross pollination is really valuable. So just don't come at it from the standpoint that there, while you might want to be gracious and ask for the opportunity, you are also, anyone who makes a move like that is bringing such important knowledge to the groups that they're shifting to within their companies.
I
So
love that because in one of our last cohorts, there was a conversation around somebody who took on a new role, but came from a completely different function, but felt that she had to abdicate to all of those others who were in the role and from more
yeah,
of a traditional path. And I was trying to echo your message, which was like, they have something to contribute, but so do you. It's
yeah,
totally different and totally unique, and it's your lived experience, it's your expertise. And so together, now this function and this team is stronger because of what you're now bringing to it. And so
yeah,
trying to help her realize, like, I don't have to like abdicate and step down
yeah,
into I'm, the same as they are, because that's not the goal.
No, that's not the goal. I mean, I was in a session earlier this week with a restaurant company, and they had an area manager or a general manager of a restaurant that was promoted to what they call an area coach. So it was kind of a lateral move, but he was new on this leadership team. And I think at first when we were in the meeting, he's like, "Well, I'm new here. Well, I'm new here." And I stopped the meeting literally, and I said, "Thank goodness that you're new here, because your perspective coming from a completely different area is equally, if not more, valuable than everybody's around, because we already know what everybody around here has been thinking. So that lateral infusion of talent, it is. So it's not only for you, it's good for the company, and you being
Totally.
able to anybody being able to talk confidently about that and humbly about that, for sure, because you are going to be learning new things. It's just so good, and it's really what every company wants and needs. So yeah, for sure. So that's one that's really valuable. And sometimes, you want to move up, and we'll get on to the next, how to strengthen fit. I mean, sometimes it literally is getting promoted. Let's say you're in an area that you really love, and you're maybe, like we're in that scenario where you're kind of starting to outgrow the role that you've been in. Maybe been in there a little too long, maybe not feeling too stretched, maybe it's getting a little bit easy. It's like, it's okay, and it's really good to have your eyes and your sights on what's the next level of responsibility if you're in an area that you're passionate about. And
And
I think,
declaring it. I
and
mean, this is the
declaring it.
one thing. We have a lot of women who've come to us who said, I've never really asked for a promotion. I thought that it would just come to me. And so I worked and I waited and I hoped. And obviously, that's not really a strategy. So, my message is always to declare, I want upward mobility. I want to
Yeah,
grow and
yeah.
be promoted. And let's work on what the path to that looks like.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you make that just a normal part of your diet in your conversation with your manager. And it doesn't, it's like, and you want people find the right cadence to have those conversations. But I love this quote, like to your point, when you're saying, like, Kelly, like, state what you want.
Mhm.
That's really valuable, because all you want to do is to be more valuable to the company. I mean, everybody wins. But I think I love this Brene Brown quote, when it's like, she says, "Clear is kind, unclear is unkind." So be kind to yourself and be clear about what it is you want and need, and why it is you think that that's a great next step for you. And don't be bashful about it. You've worked, assuming that you're like getting ready for that promotion, or let's say it's earlier, talking about a year before. Hey, you're moving forward, and that's what companies want. That's what the leaders in the companies want. They want to grow their own. So be engaged actively in that process and take responsibility for it, because that's a wonderful way to grow. Responsibility, money, income, influence, all of that is that's a really important way.
Yeah.
So, and I guess there's, another one that might be worth mentioning. And sometimes, let's say you're in a good role, and you're kind of being challenged, but maybe you're feeling like you're on thin relationship waters. You're just kind of feeling maybe a little bit isolated for some reason. And sometimes what people need is just to do maybe a better job of building support around them. And anybody you have to take responsibility for this yourself too. So it's like, how could you convene, some coworkers to share best practices, or seek out a sponsor, or a reverse mentoring relationship, or, those kinds of things can help fuel you, so that you don't just feel alone in your role, just with you and your manager. Like, when you kind of spread the wealth a little bit about the relationships and the container in which you're operating, it can really change the game when you kind of broaden the foundation that you have. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's really all people really need, because they're like kind of happy where they are there, but they're just kind of not quite embedded enough. And Lord knows there's enough opportunities for those kinds of contributions, and people who are also seeking that. You can just take the lead and bring together people and run some experiments with people. So I think that's also really important to consider, I think, in
I think
this.
that's a really good reminder. It's easier to do when you work in an office. Many of the people we work with are remote or hybrid. And so, really, it's a great reminder to be thinking about cross-functional relationships and not just staying in your little, bubble, or your little
Yeah.
team, or your little set of tasks that need to get done. And so, I love that. And especially your suggestion about reverse mentoring, because that's a topic you might know I was passionate about. I wrote an
Yeah,
article a number of years ago for
yeah,
Forbes about that. And I think that young people forget, or earlier mid-career, that we don't always remember that we also have something to offer to a mentor.
yeah,
So it's not just a mentor, showing us their ways and their
yeah,
advice and their wisdom and those things, but also what can we share with them?
yeah,
What
yeah,
can we teach them, whether it's social media skills or cultural insights, or, this is just how my lived experience is different than yours, whatever it is. I used to have one who was keeping me up to date on all the technology trends
yeah.
that was super cool. So that I love the notion of
Yeah,
mentoring and reverse
yeah,
mentoring.
yeah. Well, and it's like, I mean, and I think it takes away the inequality in the relationship. Like
Yes,
they're doing something for you. Because I think I remember when you were getting that coaching and you always had the biggest smile on your face when that was done, because you
totally.
were like, you're like being fueled. And so I think as you're growing in your career and you can find the right people to kind of do that with,
Yeah,
it's like you're providing as much of a gift, if not more, than they are. And so
yeah,
have that confidence, and it's great practice ground to work with people maybe that are at different levels or might have different perspectives. So it's such a worthy thing to try to build. And I would always suggest don't wait for the program to come out. You can go build these relationships with a formal program or not. It doesn't
yeah,
require.
totally. Well, I love that. Well,
Yeah,
let's talk a little bit about priorities and how we can
yeah,
help maybe narrow down for people to think about what's important to them. So we created a worksheet that is all about finding fit, that can help people think through the conditions in which they thrive, and then start to consider. And I'm going to use the phrase non-negotiables, but what I mean by that is really focusing on what really matters. I'm curious of your guidance around arriving at non-negotiables, or do you think that phrase is a good phrase, or what would you say on that?
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, one thing I wanted to step back, and then I'll get into that because I think it was important when you brought up and you were kind of pointing towards the direction of taking responsibility, not waiting for things to come at you.
Yeah.
And I just think like one last point on that is, nothing I think is more important than one's growth. Okay. It's like that is, and taking responsibility for it, having inner authority for your own growth as a human
Mhm.
being and as a contributor. Once you take full responsibility for that, and then you understand how growth happens, I think it's combining your desire and your ownership for growth, and then also recognizing how growth happens. And I just, one little piece of wisdom, because like when we talked about earlier on, like, hey, you reach a hardship or something that's really difficult, all too often people just like, all right, I'm going to leave, and that's not where growth happens. So I think the way true growth happens when you commit to something, you're going to commit to learning this new thing or leading in this way or whatever it is, whatever that commitment is. And then you have to have the courage to work through the hard parts of that,
Mhm.
to learn and to fumble and to all of that, and,
Grit,
and, and,
yeah.
and normalize that, because most people they get afraid or they can walk away. Once you then commit to it and you work through all that chunky stuff that kind of can be difficult, then you start to really develop the capabilities, and you feel
Mhm.
you feel that mastery coming on. And then after that happens, then you have the confidence. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of times where we get it out of line, and particularly that's why you want to use all the roles that you're in and wring them out for everything they're worth, because they're training grounds for you to practice that cycle. And it's like, I think a lot of times we get it backwards. We're like, I want to be confident in that before I take or put my name in the hat. And it's just not going to work that way.
Yeah. You
You
learn by
know,
doing. That's
you
what
learn by doing, you learn by action and fumbling, and it's okay. That it just makes you normal. So just the more that you can have like little fumbles and practice that fumble cycle where I'm going to commit
yeah.
to this. I'm going to have the courage to step into it. I'm going to fumble and have some capability building, and then the confidence will come. It's a
Yeah. Love
great
that.
little cycle. But I think back to your question about you know, when I think you said it was, I think it was had to do with, are there non-negotiables,
Yeah.
right? And I don't know. I mean, I think everybody is individually has their own perspective on this, which I think is really, really true. I would say I probably have three for me that bubble up, but they might be different for somebody else. But for me, I think for me, the non-negotiables, and I think even at big companies, there's an overall big company culture. There's probably cultures of divisions, departments. So culture is kind of a localized concept, quite honestly. But I think first and foremost, it's really being clear on your own values. Like,
Mhm.
what is it that you value? What's core to you? And just making sure that the role you're in, or the department you're in, or the people you're hanging with at whatever company you're at, that's compatible with you, that they overlap. They don't have to be perfect, but by and large, you feel like you're with your tribe, and you're not with people who are not, because otherwise I think you'll feel empty and you'll never feel soulful in your work. And that doesn't mean that anybody or everybody around you has to have the exact same values, but if it's not aligned, you're just not going to really be growing. You're not
Yeah.
going to be enthusiastic. I think the second thing when I'm thinking about fit or adjusting my situation around fit is truly prioritizing your growth and development, your next opportunities. And when you think about your growth and development, I would suggest having some quiet coffee time with yourself, and not just thinking about this move, but imagining what the move after that could be and how this move could potentially be. Now, it might change, but bringing that kind of intentionality to it, I think
I
is
think you called
important.
that in another session we did. I think you called that clarity breaks, that we all
Yeah,
need
clarity
to take
breaks.
our
Yeah,
own clarity breaks.
I mean, yeah, have coffee with yourself. Like that 40 minutes or 45 minutes with no paper, no phone, just a blank sheet, or just a blank sheet of paper. It's like we need that downtime. It's like that's
Yeah.
where we actually come up with our best stuff, is when we pause to reflect. So definitely prioritizing growth. And when I say it, because we talked a little bit earlier about, sometimes you can chase the money too early. And it's like, money is important. We all want money, and we certainly probably want more of it. But growth, if you chase growth, the money will come. It's just,
Mhm.
don't get fooled by that. And I think last, I mean, like when I'm thinking about this issue of fit, I mean, work is a part of your life, and it's an important part of your life, but it's not your life. And so as you're imagining yourself into new roles or new companies or new promotions, being able to accommodate for your total life. Can you picture your total life in that scenario, and you taking responsibility for it? I mean, so it's
Yeah.
like, if you're not working out, like that's on you. It's not necessarily on the job. So it's like, really, is this an environment where I can really, really bring my, if I'm bringing my A game, it will accommodate my life. And so those are some things. Everybody will probably have their own list, but I think those are ones that I think are worth.
I love that. I know at the beginning of my career, when I ultimately left one of my first positions after many, many years, I remember looking around at the leadership, and none of them, had partners or families or relationships that they had anybody in their lives personally. And I
Yeah,
just remember thinking, wow, that's not what I'm aspiring to. And
yeah,
so that was a moment. So these things, it's all different for everybody, but I appreciate you sharing those.
yeah,
And then now I want to really talk about so most of the people we actually engage in the Equip sessions are with an employer, and they're focused
yeah,
on strengthening fit, like we've talked about. But some people who are at the beginning of that journey and trying to find an employer that is a good fit. And we talked a little bit about it, but one of the things I get asked a lot, which is, what are the questions I could ask? And not like the ones you can Google on Glassdoor and whatever. But like, what are really thoughtful questions that can start to reveal
yeah.
the culture of the business, and that could help indicate whether a company is a good fit or not?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's, I always think if it's kind of you're going to a new company or a new division or something like that, like I do think it's good to do a little bit of your own research, don't just
Mhm.
like read the job description and go in there. I think just some basic, like, reading what that company is all about is certainly important. I would say that, you know, if you have the opportunity, when you have the opportunity to talk to people, is I think it's really telling, not only about what the vision is, but how the vision is translated down through the company. Like
Mhm.
when you can ask questions about how do the values play out in this company? are, and just let them talk. Because sometimes you'll go to a company and the values, they're like accessories posters on the wall. They're not lived, they're just words. And
Mhm.
sometimes if you just ask the question, you'll get a real clear answer, like if how real they might be. Or
Mhm.
you could ask about, hey, what's the vision for the company in the next 3 or 5 years? Like, and if the person that you're talking to is looking back at you blank, it'll tell you something about the company, because a really well-run company, everybody will be able to talk at least at a high level
Mhm.
about those things. So you're going to learn not only from the answer you get, and if they are able to answer it, but from the non-answer you'll get,
Mhm.
because you realize that they're maybe not quite as connected. Um, I think I think there's a lot of really interesting questions. I always think like one of the questions that I always like to ask is, hey, who are the people here that say, like, what are the qualities of the people here that really thrive or succeed? What are those qualities? And when you
Mhm.
hear them talking about it, it's kind of like this softball question, but just put your ears up and you're going to hear things that you really either love and really can step into, or you're going to hear it's a sweatshop and here's how you get ahead. You work all
Mhm.
day long, whatever it is. But those kinds of insightful questions, and then just be ready to hear what's coming back, because I think you'll find that those soft questions are really telling.
Yeah, especially when you ask them in such an open-ended way, or tell me
Yeah,
more is, always a good phrase to add in there. The one thing that we hear a lot, I know is really important to women in our community, is the focus on DE&I. And
yeah,
there's a bit of an odd and unfortunate backlash, I think, that's happening in the
yeah,
investor community and in
yeah,
some orbits. But this topic has never been more important, but
yeah,
how would you propose this question, so that so that you don't get a surface answer?
yeah.
Of course, DE&I is important to us. Like, how would you recommend addressing that topic?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's like, I think you want to have, like, when you're talking in this area, try to get to the conversation to more specifics. Like, so
Mhm.
like, what are you all doing in the DE&I area? What's actually had an impact? Um, you know, who in management is involved in these
Sponsoring.
topics, and sponsors, and then leave room for them to step in. Because what you'll see is in companies where they are really doing it well, someone will fill that airspace and you don't really need to say a whole lot. The question can be minimalist. But asking for specifics is like really valuable, because you'll know if they're swimming and they're just making it up and it's just a bunch of like nonsense, or if it's like really, really, really good stuff. And so I think it's asking more specific questions, and
Yeah.
like, where are the biggest successes? What are the programs that have really landed and actually changed the game? How have these efforts already, or how are they beginning to impact the nature of how teams work together? And just let them roll,
I
because
love it.
yeah,
I just
you'll
came out of a big meeting with a public company I'm involved with, and they are so on fire on this topic. And you could ask any of the employees, and they would be able, just like you said, to be able to say, here's a strategy, here's a sponsor, here's what we're doing, here's what's working, here's what's not, and we're still trying to figure
yeah.
it out. So
Yeah, but
I
even if
love
they
that
answer the
guidance.
not category, it's great, because then one of their values is about integrity and honesty, and they're
Yeah.
not a place where they have to put a show on, because everybody's struggling. They're trying to figure out the best way to make these programs really, truly valuable.
Yeah, totally.
So,
That's great. Well, I
yeah,
know I'm gonna wrap up with a one or two more questions here.
yeah,
And so if somebody is committed to strengthening fit, sometimes what happens is like the corporate bureaucracy just, takes forever to maybe
yeah,
see change on the company side, whether it's a promotion or whatever. So how can people stay motivated to continue strengthening their fit
yeah.
over time versus like expecting like immediate
Yeah,
change?
yeah, yeah. Well, I think back to one of our earlier points, like if you really sign yourself up for the inner authority of growing yourself, um, you will never ever wait on the corporate bureaucracy to help you grow. So that's
Mm.
a mindset thing. Once you're like really clear that that's the case. And you take, I mean, in some big companies, they'll have all kinds of learning agendas and curriculums and universities and things like that. Some mid-sized companies, maybe not. But you take proactive stance because you can always plug into those programs that you know are going to be valuable to you, even if some things are getting hung up. But the minute you feel stagnant, don't be waiting. There's all kinds of opportunities. And if you're in a smaller company, there's all kinds of free learning and opportunities that you can get out there. The other thing I will say is, don't underestimate your own abilities within the context that you're in to make improvements on your team or your department. So I think, practice your own kind of, I think of leadership as community building. And
Mm,
so communities could be communities between two people, for a
mm,
department, a company. And so I think it's good practice for you to like, how can you build little movements yourself with teams, making things better? Maybe you start up a peer group, maybe whatever it is, but you never ever need to be stagnant. And there's so much value to be able to be brought. And so if that's your thing and you have some energy for that, it will be noted, and you will likely, if you can do some good with it, it'll help you grow faster in terms of your skills, but also your notoriety. I love this quote. You've heard me use this quote before, but I think it's really important because even at the lowest levels of companies, we make change at the lowest levels of company. Don't assume that the change can only come from the top.
mm.
And it's this Margaret Mead quote that says, "Never doubt that a small group of committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." And
Ah,
so I think it's like, take up arms for yourself and for your mates that you're working with, and do good in that little world that's yours. And it's just wonderful because it'll give you confidence. You're growing your influence and you're growing your leadership.
I love it. I love your passion on this. So let's just close with some very
Yeah.
specific words maybe that you would suggest. So a lot of times what's hard for people in our community is to have that conversation with their manager. So they want to really just say, hey, I, love this company and I want to strengthen my fit, and I, want to figure out how we can do this. And, you really want to build trust, but like, how could you have this conversation and frame it effectively so they don't worry that you're going to leap and then they start, treating you differently
Yeah.
or think you're not committed? Like, how would you frame a conversation with your manager specifically about strengthening fit?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's two points. I think first is, once you've taken up inner authority for your own growth and optimizing your fit, which you've done
Mhm.
at this point, just make sure once you've done that, you've had the internal discussion. Make sure that the discussion you're having internally is the same discussion you're having with your manager.
Mhm.
If you're having two different thought tracks,
Mhm.
you're not serving yourself very well. Now, to the question that you really asked was like, well, how might I have that question? How do I approach that? And a couple things. One is, I think you need to like if your mindset is what I'm wanting is maybe counter to what they want, you're operating from a mental model that is actually not correct. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, Now there might be
Say
some
more.
managers.
Say
Yeah,
more about that.
yeah. So you have to recognize that your desire to grow, to optimize fit, to make a better impact in the company is not only in your best interest, it's in the company's
Mhm.
best interest. And so it doesn't need to be polarizing. It's not like I'm trying to win and get something from you. It's
Good
like I'm
reminder.
trying to align with you to do goodness and to make you, manager, look great because if people aren't, not only their growth and promotions, but the fit, companies want people to find their fit because they stay longer, they're more happy, they're more valuable, they contribute more, they're out of work less, all of that. And so, I mean, so I think entering it from the standpoint that growth is a win-win proposition. So it doesn't need to be like it's a showdown meeting with your manager or your
Mhm.
boss. It's not that at all. And so here's the other thing. So on the back end of that, I have found that making your manager or somebody in your department or whoever, making those people your allies to help
Mhm.
you with this is a much better way to go than thinking you're going to the well to try to extract some more value or more money or more whatever.
Or
out
a
of it.
fight, like it's not a
Or a
fight.
fight. It's not a
Should it
fight.
be? Yeah.
And once you create that environment with your ally, or every manager's different, so you have to use your own judgment in terms of how they are. But once you've created that allyship with your manager or somebody else, then you're in the position to have the perfectly imperfect conversation with them. And it's such a joy when you allow yourself to be there. And what I mean by that is you don't have to go in there with all the answer to the riddle and thread that needle just perfectly. You could say things like, "Hey, boss or manager or Sally or Jim or whoever the hell it is, I need your help thinking about this."
Hmm.
Boom. And then they're all, even by that entry point, and then you're going to still cover all the topics. It's like, here's what I've been noticing. And if you've had your coffee breaks or your clarity breaks, you'll have your points together that is resonating with you and where your skills are and where your passions are. And Lord knows it's hard to get great people. So it's in everybody's best interest to help you along that path. And you know what? It's great self-selection too, because if they aren't, maybe you're not the right place anyways. So it's like you want to be a place that just welcomes it. So
Well,
yeah,
I love the perfectly imperfect conversation, and we could probably talk for hours, but I
yeah,
want to just say thank you, Jeff, for sharing your insights on Fit today. You have been very illuminating and generous, so thank you.
yeah, you bet. Well, it's great being with you and wishing everybody good luck as they continue to transition in their careers.
All right, we'll see you soon.
All right, talk to you.
And to all of you tuning in, reflect on what resonated most with you and what actions you want to take to strengthen your own fit. As Jeff's just said, it's really your responsibility. It's in your power. You have the power to create the conditions for your own growth and fulfillment. And some actions you can take now, you can download our free worksheet to take inventory on how you can improve your fit. You can follow us on LinkedIn because we share a lot of tips and insights on this topic. And you can also sign up for my newsletter at equippedwomen.com that will help you advance your career and love your life. Thanks, everybody. See you soon.